It's 8 o'clock Pacific time. It's September 7th, and it's time. It's time to listen to John Hagel, one of maybe the most known advisor to Fortune 500 companies all over the world, and also an advisor to the World Economic Forum, and actively participating in the Global Peter Drucker Forum. So today we're going to have the honor to listen to a short speech from John Hagel. But before we do that, I would like to just share a little bit about the center. So again, welcome to the Rendan Hui Silicon Valley Research Center. The center was established only 2 years ago in 2020, and it was established based on a need or filling a gap in the market. We lacked institutions that focused on the 21st century business skills, and we wanted to create a center that were developing the new curriculum, the new business management curriculum, and then offer those in the form of courses and training programs. The center is a collaboration between Mellon College and HMI, which is Hire's Institute for Management Innovations. We also would welcome other big corporations that share the quest and the understanding of the importance of management innovation. That is not what you do, it's how you do it that it really matters in the competitive game. Hire understood that, Google understand that, and many others understand that, and we would welcome more funding to the center. The mission of the center is to support business professionals by providing 21st century business skills. We have primarily three main offerings. One is webinars, which is one that you do all right now. And this is actually the 8th webinar in this during this year. So we are producing pretty many during every year. They are free, and the purpose is to disseminate the latest knowledge by thought leaders that are well known in the world. The other one is Open Virtual Leadership Program, which is, if you're interested, you can take with John Hagel after this webinar, you can take his virtual leadership course, and that will be in October 27th. And then finally, if you're interested, you can also do corporate specific virtual or in-person leadership program, where we also offer a leadership program on campus. And here it's, of course, more tailored to your own need as a corporation. We try to follow what we believe a 360 digital age mindset when we develop the new curriculum for the 21st century. It's in strategy, it's in leadership, it's on culture, organizational design. It's about the new way of working with ecosystem. It's a new way of working with customer and user interfaces, and of course, new technologies. So we try to cover all this, and we call it the 360 digital age mindset. The team that is behind this is very different. If you go to any big institutions, and you can go to any of the well-known that is just around the corner of Mellon College, you will find that they use their own faculty. The question is, what is the probability that their faculty is the best or are the best in the world on that specific topic? For example, ecosystem. The question or the answer is that is most probably not. So we took another approach. Our approach is not to use only our own faculty. In fact, right now we don't have any of our faculty on board. We have a virtual network of world-known experts from outside. Here you can see John Hagel, but we also have other people like David Tees and Jana Kingskleber. And they are all thought leaders from both the academia and corporate world. Today, the focus on this webinar will be leadership for exponential impact. And as I said before, it's going to be a course on October 27th and November 3rd and November 10th. We design it in a very convenient way for you, we hope at least, that it's only 3 to 4 hours per session. And in total, you will do around 12 hours of very intense training with John Hagel, face-to-face, live, small group setting, and highly interactive over Zoom. And so far, we have a very high satisfaction score, and we have clients that have, as you can see here, have seldom been inspired this much in such a short time. The notion of impact groups, how we need to learn to create new knowledge in ecosystem and embrace the passion of the explorer, will be injected into my work and leadership thanks to this course. And this is Henrik Linnet from Ericsson. And with that, I would like to stop for now and hand over to the main star of today, John Hagel.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share some perspectives. I'm sorry it's going to be so short, and hopefully there'll be a little bit of Q&A that we can hear what's on your mind. But I'm going to start as context by saying that I believe all institutions are facing a big challenge today. The traditional approaches to leadership that led to great success in the past are becoming less and less effective in a rapidly changing world. And the successful leaders of the future are going to have to adopt a fundamentally different approach to creating value. But the good news is if they adopt this new approach, they're going to create value that would have been unimaginable in the past, exponential value. So what's the source of this challenge? Again, I want to provide some context before diving into the specific leadership changes. I've done a lot of research on something that I call the big shift, which are the long-term forces that are reshaping the global economy. And I believe it's been playing out for decades, although we're still in the early stages of the big shift. And one of the consequences of this big shift is that we're experiencing mounting performance pressure on all of us. It takes many different forms. Competition is intensifying on a global scale. Pace of change accelerating. Things we thought we could count on are no longer there. And then extreme disruptive events that come in out of nowhere. That's a lot of pressure. But those are words. I just want to put some numbers to the words here. Again, based on research that I've done, I looked in the US economy at all public companies, not a sample, but all public companies listed on public exchanges over a period from 1965 until 2018. Return on assets for all public companies in the United States has declined by 75%. It's been a long, sustained erosion. There are some waves that correspond to the short-term cycles, but the long-term trend is absolutely clear and continuing. And as if that weren't enough, I mean, there have been studies that have been done on the life of companies when they make it onto the S&P 500. It's the leading list of companies in the United States. You're leading as a company if you're on that list. It turns out that from 1937, the height of the Depression, until today, the average lifetime of a company on that list has declined by 80%. Death rates have been increasing significantly. And in the face of all this mounting performance pressure, there is a natural human reaction to feel fear. And it becomes a vicious cycle because the more that we feel the fear, the more we tend to be more short-term in our thinking, the more we tend to be risk averse, we lose trust in others, and the fear just mounts over time. So I think it's a challenge, but escaping this vicious cycle is going to require fundamental transformation and not incremental change. And when I talk about transformation, I mean the metaphor I use is going from the caterpillar to the butterfly, unrecognizable. It's not just adding digital technology to the business that we've always run and will continue to run. it's fundamentally changing the business from the ground up. And it takes many different forms. And again, given limited time, I can't go into detail here, but one of the shifts here, transformations, is moving from a model of scalable efficiency to scalable learning. All the large institutions we have around the world today are driven by an institutional model of scalable efficiency. The key to success is doing things faster and cheaper than before. That's efficiency. The challenge is that model is actually becoming less and less efficient in a rapidly changing world. And we need to embrace a new model that I call scalable learning. And this is a model where everyone in the organization is driven to learn faster together. And a key clarification, when I talk about learning in this context, I'm not talking about training programs and sharing existing knowledge. I'm talking about learning in the form of creating entirely new knowledge that didn't exist before and delivering more and more value to the stakeholders. That's a very different institutional model. And that leads to redefining work. What is work? Well, in most large institutions today, work consists of very tightly specified routine tasks that are done in the same standardized way throughout the organization, in the same efficient way throughout the organization. Routine tasks, highly standardized, highly defined. Unfortunately, again, I think that form of work is becoming more and more challenged. And the work in the future, I believe everyone in an organization will be focusing on addressing unseen opportunities to create more value. Wherever they are in the organization, not just in research labs or innovation centers, every part of the organization, because we're constantly confronting new situations and focusing the work on that and taking all those routine tasks and automating them. Thank God we have technology that will increasingly take those routine tasks so that we can focus on the work that's really important and value creating. So fundamental transformation in the organizations, all institutions around the world, in this big shift world. What does that require from leadership? Well, it requires a very different approach to leadership in many different dimensions. Again, I won't have time to go into great detail, but I'll try to skim the surface so you have a sense of the ground that's being covered here. But let me start with strategy. One of the key elements of leadership is defining the strategy for the institution. And we all know that strategy, at least today, the way large institutions run strategy, it's the 5-year plan. Year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, that's the strategy. Just follow the strategy plan. I believe, again, in this big shift world, if we're moving to a world of scalable learning, we need to adopt a very different approach to strategy. And here I've been very inspired by, I've been in Silicon Valley now for over 40 years, and I've worked with some of the most successful tech companies. They have a very different approach to strategy than the traditional institutions. And I've come to call this approach to strategy zoom out, zoom in. And what that means is we focus on 2 different time horizons in parallel. One time horizon, 10 to 20 years. And on that horizon, the questions are, what is our relevant market or industry going to look like 10 to 20 years from now? And what are the really big opportunities that we could be addressing in that future market? That's zoom out. Zoom in, very different time horizon, 6 to 12 months. And on that horizon, the questions are, what are the 2 or 3 initiatives, no more, 2 or 3 initiatives that we could be pursuing in the next 6 to 12 months that would have the greatest impact in accelerating our movement towards that longer term opportunity? And how would we measure progress and impact? So that's Two very different time horizons, 10 to 20 years, 6 to 12 months. The companies that pursue this zoom out, zoom in approach actually spend almost no time on 1 to 5 years, that 5-year plan horizon. No, it's all about long-term destination, direction, and short-term action and learning in terms of impact. Are we making the progress? Are we accelerating our progress towards that longer-term opportunity? So very different approach to strategy. And I think, again, going to be critical for leaders to embrace in order to start that process of transformation in their company. They don't look ahead and see the really big opportunities and then commit to action today, there's not going to be the progress that's needed. So that's another piece of strategy has to do with growth. I mean, all large institutions around the world today are under increasing pressure for growth. You know, why can't you grow more? And in my experience, when leaders are confronted with that growth question, they tend to focus on two options: make or buy. Those are the two approaches to growth. We either grow organically, internally, or we go out and do a big acquisition. And the only question is, how much of each are we going to do? There are only two options. I believe there's a third option that is not yet on the table, but needs to be. And it's what I call leveraged growth. And in this context, what I'm talking about is how can we create more and more value for our customers and stakeholders by mobilizing more and more third parties that can deliver that value and capture some of that value for ourselves. That's leveraged growth. Huge opportunity there. You can grow much more quickly with far less resource than would have ever been imaginable. But again, not yet on the agenda of leaders, needs to be. We also, when talking about strategy, I want to introduce a concept that it's been the focus of my latest book. It's what I call corporate narratives. And unfortunately, when I talk about corporate narratives, most people think, oh, you're talking about our story about how we got to where we are today as a company. No. In the way I think about narratives, corporate narratives, first of all, it's not about the company, it's about the customers. It's about the stakeholders that you're trying to reach. And the question is, it's looking into the future, not into the past. And the question is, in the future, what is the really big opportunity that our customers or stakeholders could be pursuing and addressing? And then what's the action that they need to take? They need to take, not us, the company, they need to take it so that they can achieve that opportunity. It's a fundamental different shift in terms of past to future, internal looking at company to looking at the customers and focusing on action. And I'll just give a very quick example of a corporate narrative. It's one of the few, there are very few that have yet been developed, but it was Apple Computer in the early 90s. It had a narrative which was condensed into the slogan of think different. But if you unpack the slogan, it was for decades, we had digital technology that took away our names, gave us numbers, made us cogs in a machine, put us in cubicles. Now, for the first time, there's a generation of technology where we can express our unique potential and individuality. But it's not going to happen automatically. You need to think different. Will you think different? It was a call to action to the customers to think different. And Apple was barely mentioned in that narrative. Yes, Apple had some tools and products that could help customers think different, but it was all about the customer and what their opportunity was and what they needed to do. I think it's a huge untapped potential for leaders of all institutions to start to think about what's the corporate narrative, what customers are we trying to address, and what's the big opportunity for them, and what action do they need to take. And if we get that right, if we have that context, we can then be much more thoughtful about what we as a company or as an institution can do to support the customers in pursuing that opportunity. So very different approach to strategy in this new leadership approach. A different approach to organization. We're all familiar with the hierarchical command and control structures that exist in large institutions around the world. I believe that in this rapidly changing world, the big shift world, we're going to need to move to what I call a cellular structure, where the core unit of organization is a small group of people. I call them impact groups, typically anywhere between 3 to 15 people, no more. And they're focused on seeking to have more and more impact that's meaningful to them and meaningful to the stakeholders that they're addressing. And that those impact groups get connected into broader networks so they can scale their impact over time. But the core unit is that small group of people who share a commitment to having impact in a specific area. And when we talk about networks, I'm talking about going beyond the individual institution or company, but ultimately the way to scale impact is to create networks that reach out beyond the institution. And in that context, there's a whole other opportunity and challenge, which is to think very differently about networks and ecosystems. And I call the ecosystems that need to be developed dynamic ecosystems. And they're organized on what I would describe as learning platforms. But the key focus of these dynamic ecosystems is creating an environment for all the participants to learn faster together. That's a very different model than the ecosystems we have today, which are typically driven by short-term transactions, buy, sell, deal done, move on. No, this is where we're forming long-term trust-based relationships because we all share a commitment and desire to learn faster and have more and more impact that's meaningful to us and to the stakeholders that we're serving. So it's the way we organize fundamentally changes. And again, transformation, not just incremental change. And then, as that weren't enough, we're talking about how we manage people. What's the people management approach as leaders of large institutions? And here I will say that in large organizations today, there's a lot of focus on what's known as worker engagement. And definitions differ, but broadly it means, do you like the work you do? Do you like the people you work with? Do you respect the organization you work for? That's an engaged worker. I believe that is perhaps important, but not sufficient. That what we need to be focusing on in people management is cultivating the passion of the workers, and a very specific form of passion. Again, this is based on research that I've been doing for decades. I've come to call it passion of the explorer. But it's a very specific form of passion that creates excitement about addressing new challenges and motivates people to want to come together to have more and more impact in addressing those challenges. And the interesting thing is the people with that passion are driven to achieve more and more of their potential. This leadership approach that I'm talking about here is interesting in that, you know, we tend to talk about leadership in institutions as having to do with improving the performance of the institution. But the leadership approach that I'm talking about here, that's going to be required in the big shift, is a leadership approach that not only improves the performance of the institution, but it helps all individuals to achieve much greater impact that's meaningful to them. They can achieve more and more of their potential by coming together in these new ways under the leadership that's fundamentally different. So a lot of change. I haven't even gotten into many of the areas, operations, operational approaches. The big thing that's been driving operations for the past several decades is business process reengineering. We need to make our processes more and more efficient, more and more tightly integrating them end to end. And I believe those processes are becoming more and more fragile. And what we really need is what I call business practice redesign. Here, the focus is not on process, it's on practice. What are the practices of the people in our organization? And how can we redesign those practices so that they can achieve even more impact by learning faster together? Very different set of practices than you have in your current institutions. So business practice redesign becomes central. And then let me just go back to leaders for a minute. What do they do differently? Many things, but one thing that I focus on in particular is in the traditional institutions that we have today, the mark of a strong leader is someone who has an answer to all the questions. No matter what the question is, you can count on the leader to have an answer. I believe that's the reason why trust is eroding in all of our institutions, because we have leaders who insist that they have the answers to all the questions. And there are only two possibilities. Either they have no idea how rapidly the world is changing, or they're lying. And in either case, trust erodes. I believe the leaders of the future, the ones who are going to be most successful, are the ones who have the most powerful and inspiring questions, and who will freely admit they don't have an answer and ask for help in coming up with answers. It sends a powerful message to the organization that questions are not only okay, they're absolutely essential, and that it's necessary to ask for help. You can't do this no matter how smart or talented you are as an individual. You're going to come up with answers a lot faster if you ask for help and come together with others. So again, I think that's a very significant and challenging shift for leaders, to go from having all the answers to having the most powerful and inspiring questions. So, I mean, bottom line, this transformation is going to be very challenging. I don't want to in any way underplay that. This is not an easy transition. And I've provided just a very high level overview of the change in leadership that's going to be required, but it's just skimming the surface. As Annika mentioned, we're doing a course starting in October 27th, 12 hours, that will go into much more detail around what this new leadership approach is. But as outcomes, I think you'll get much more detailed exploration of a very different leadership approach, one that will deliver exponential impact. I believe ultimately, when we talk about the big shift, the paradox in the big shift is, on the one side, as I mentioned, it's creating mounting performance pressure. On the other side, at the exactly same time, those same forces are creating exponentially expanding opportunity. We can create far more value, far more quickly, with far less resource than would have been imaginable a few decades ago. But we need a fundamentally different approach to leadership in order to make that happen. And that's what I'm so passionate about and committed to. So with that, let me turn it over and see if we have some questions and have some discussion.
Right. So thank you, Mr. Hagel. Before we do that, I know you want to ask a lot of questions now, but before we start that section, I just want to share with you again about the course coming up. And it's important to know that in addition to John Hagel, that will focus on the leadership, as you heard, we need a 360-degree change, more or less, of the traditional business, right? But in this course, we focus on leadership. And what is really nice is that Hagel will provide you with frameworks on how you can actually create maybe a 10x growth instead of, a 2x growth, but also how you can maximize the human potential in the firm from a leadership perspective. With him, we will have different cases, industry cases, and our industry cases are not just good at one dimension. Many companies, they're good at, they're good at product development, they're good at the customer service, and then they are used as an example. Our examples that we use they have already transformed or use a totally new management model. And that's why we use them. So we will have Google on stage, and we will also have GE Appliances on stage, which is a company that pretty recently transformed its business 180 degree or 360 degree then. They are still in the process of transforming, but it's very, very much we can learn from that case. Also, here you can see very shortly the agenda of the 3 sessions, 3 to 4 hours each of them. It should be convenient over online. And as you heard Mr. Hagel talking about the big shift, the tool zoom out, zoom in, or method, how you can work with strategy, and how you can make sure that you're focusing on the impact rather than, operational quality problems for that is as now maybe only because we're so absorbed about problems here and now. But how do you focus on impact that really matters, and how do you select those? And then we go over also to the narratives that he mentioned. He will mention briefly dynamic ecosystem, and then how you can accelerate and cultivate this passion and deploy and learning platform. If you would be interested later on to do even more on ecosystem, Mr. Hagel is also providing a course in November 30th, only on ecosystem, where he will deep dive into that even more. And as a final thing, if you are interested, you can get a 10% discount now by using Executive 10, and you find us on this website. With that, I would like to stop sharing and ask Isaac, do we have any questions?
Currently, no one seems to have asked a question in the chat. I did ask people, please ask a question now.
Yeah, I'm sure there must be a lot of questions about either Hagel's work or Hagel's perspective on leadership and strategy.
I've been speechless. What can I say?
Yeah, right.
There are 17 people in the chat.
Okay, so take the opportunity to ask. So meanwhile, while we're waiting, do we have any question, or should I go, Isaac?
Yeah, you can do some Q&A.
Right. Okay, so I would love to start with, one of the challenges, and this is a question to you, John. One challenge that I noticed when I work with large firm or discuss with them is this huge problem to actually being disrupting, making more disruptive innovation. So even when we talk innovation, we talk usually about innovation on our current businesses. In your course, I'm fascinated over how you talk about the edge, and you define it very clearly as well. And if I understand it correctly, those more disruptive, the new billion-dollar businesses. Do you want to just maybe talk a little bit about that? Because it seems that is one part that I think most corporations actually don't really do today.
Sure. No, it's a long topic. It's, again, part of the course, but the high level view is I've been involved in helping transformation efforts for decades, and most of the transformation efforts, what I call top down big bang changes, the leader somehow comes up with the view that everything has to change. They issue the mandate, everything has to change, and nothing changes. It's just the resistance, the immune system and the antibodies mobilize to resist the change. One key piece of advice I have to leaders is never, ever underestimate the power of the immune system and the antibodies that exist in a large organization.
Right.
So rather than going top down, big bang to drive the change, my recommendation is, again, it's all connected. Start with the zoom out, zoom in. Look ahead 10 to 20 years to see what is that really big exponential opportunity that you could be addressing that will be emerging over the next 10 to 20 years. And then find an edge to your existing institution. A few people, modest resources, but that have the potential to start on that journey of addressing that opportunity and support the effort to scale that edge. And the key here, again, is to clarify that I'm not talking about diversification or growth initiatives, just growth initiatives. That edge will become the new core of the institution. It will be so large that anything that you're doing today becomes marginal. And so the focus and the commitment in scaling an edge is to drive the transformation by scaling that edge until it becomes the new core of the business. And the key is showing progress quickly. Again, that gets to the zoom in piece of focusing on some initiatives where you can show impact, because that will help to overcome some of the fear and skepticism of the people in the core who are looking at this big opportunity or need for change and saying that's a fantasy. No, we're showing real progress today. Come and join. And over time, the edge pulls more and more of the people from the core into the edge as it scales. But a very different approach to change, and I think much more successful in addressing the immune system and the antibodies.
Right. I see here Donna has, she's very active now. She has very interesting questions. One is, to what extent are you addressing the shift from linear decision-making to a multidimensional approach to encourage the big questions?
Great question. And yes, it's a key part of my work. I should mention on the side, one of my activities is I'm on the board of trustees of a group called the Santa Fe Institute, which started many decades ago to focus on learning about complex adaptive systems and the recognition that anybody everywhere is embedded in a complex adaptive system. That if you just take a linear mindset and focus on one element, you're never going to understand the full dynamics of what's ahead. And so you have to step back and look at the system as a whole and really understand how it's evolving and where and how you can help shape that evolution to create much more value for your stakeholders. So I think it's absolutely critical and again, challenging. I mean, it's not easy, but I think more and more essential.
Mm. And she had a follow-up question. What core beliefs drive the immune system? What core beliefs driving the immune system need to be addressed?
Well, I would say rather than beliefs, it's emotions. I've come to believe over time that the immune system is being driven by fear. The people in the immune system are not evil people. They're not trying to do bad things. They're very well-intentioned people who want to do the best thing for the company, but their fear leads them to become much more risk averse and want to just squeeze harder on the way that success has been achieved in the past. And so I think, first of all, recognizing the fear, acknowledging the fear, it's a natural reaction, but then how can we overcome the fear? How can we help people to move beyond the fear? And again, that's why I emphasize showing results quickly and in the context of a really big opportunity, because now you can start to get people moving into an excitement about what's ahead. I will say too, just as an aside, that most institutions, when they talk about transformation, use what I call the burning platform image of, we're on a burning platform. This is going to collapse. We're all going to die if we don't change. We've got to change now. And that just feeds the fear. Oh my God, we're on a burning platform. Oh no. Versus, no, what's the really amazing opportunity ahead? And how can we start to have impact now to accelerate our movement towards that opportunity?
Yeah. And it's very interesting. I mean, regarding movement, what I find interesting to have the pleasure to work with thought leaders like Mr. Hagel and others, is that you have this common view about the future and about businesses. It's not one person; it's a movement, and for me, it's a clear indication that we are in a huge, if not a paradigm shift in how we lead companies. So one question here that is relevant, because I'm in that situation myself, is that, spotting opportunities take a different focus than fixing things. And what will support this curiosity? I would say maybe energy in order to see the opportunities.
Yeah, it's challenging. And again, I think we get into the issue of psychology of how can we motivate people and build excitement. In my experience, one key way is what I call learning journeys, which is taking leaders into areas where there's a lot of innovation going on today. It could be anywhere from Silicon Valley to Tel Aviv in Israel to Shenzhen in China. But having them actually see the kind of changes that are occurring today, that again, this isn't just a fantasy, it's happening now, starts to open up their minds to say, oh my God, this is real, this is happening. And how can we participate in this? Versus, just hiding from it or pretending that it doesn't exist. So I've found that's, and it's having the leaders go into these areas versus having somebody come to the conference room and give a lecture. It's that experience of being there that really helps shift the emotions.
Yeah, we got here comment from Fabi. She's an innovative leader in higher ed. So I definitely recognize your question as well. And also with working with corporation, there's a lot of fear due to cannibalization, which can limit the ability for the edge to grow. Absolutely, right? This is a pretty huge dilemma. Do you want to say anything about that? How can you actually take yourself around that problem? Because I think most have that problem. You don't want to take any resource from your current businesses because it's a risk, and then still you might see the opportunity, but you need like evidence after evidence after evidence before you even dare to do something.
Yeah, well, again, I don't want to dismiss how challenging it is. It is very challenging. But again, I have a whole set of design principles for scaling the edge. And one of the key design principles is to minimize dependence on the core. That if you require a lot of resources from the core or support from the core, you're going to be vulnerable to the resistance and the immune system that says, no, we have stuff to do ourselves. It's taking very modest resources at the outset and as quickly as possible showing real impact from those resources that help to overcome that resistance and skepticism.
So with that, I think time is out for questions. We do hope that we will be able to see you and discuss with you and even maybe be challenged by you on October 27th. It will be, as I said, 3 to 4 hours per session over 3 weeks. We usually are working in a small group setting, very highly interactive, and where you can ask questions directly. We also are going to offer a follow-up workshop if that is desired. So after the course, we can sit down with you, maybe with you and colleague from your company, to have a small follow-up workshop after that course. So if you want to make something happen and change happen in your own organization. Don't forget to use the discount code as you get your 10%, executive 10, and you find us on executivemenlo.edu. And thank you for this time. Next webinar with Hagel will be on September 29th. So don't miss that. You see it on LinkedIn. It will be on dynamic ecosystem, his next course. So that will be on September 29th. See you hopefully very soon again. Take care and keep you all safe. Bye.